Greystone, the reforged warrior, Prince Charming, so nice he lives twice, and while a lot of people consider him one of the most basic heroes in the game because of the fact he only has 2 real abilities, he is still incredibly useful and in the hands of the right player can carry any team to glory. Greystone relies heavily on his positioning, rotations and game awareness skills rather than his abilities. He was so often used in the jungle, but with that role better performed by a hero with better jungle clearing abilities and a stun, pull or leap needed for ganking, I think Greystone's best role is solo in the blue lane. This allows him to get level 5 incredibly quickly and often dominate his lane because of his ultimate. Let's take a look at Greystone's abilities before we go any further. His basic attack is Noble Strike, which deals physical damage. We then have his right mouse button, Assault the Gates. Greystone leaps as far as 1,000 units, dealing physical damage in a small area of effect when he lands. This is a great tool for escaping or initiating. The ability has good enough height so you can use it to jump into lane. I personally use this ability more for escaping or putting myself into a better position rather than initiating because of the long cooldown. Greystone's Q is the last non-passive ability. Greystone summons a fiery whirlwind that deals physical damage in an area around him over the course of 5 seconds. The ability is great because it provides Greystone with a good amount of pushing potential as well as allows him to hit multiple targets in teamfights. While it might not do a huge amount of damage to enemy heroes, it does stop them from entering travel mode if they are trying to escape, allowing your allies to catch up to them. The final 2 abilities are both passive abilities but complement Greystone's kit perfectly. Stoic. Greystone's E gives him an additional 11 physical armor and 100 health. These amounts increase with each level of this ability. I love Stoic, especially if I'm laning against another physical hero. This really allows me to bully them in lane. I'll generally level up my Stoic as much as possible if I am against a physical hero, so that I can grab more damage when I back and force pressure onto their tower. Greystone's ultimate is reforged. When Greystone dies, he turns to stone. After 3 seconds, his spirit re-enters his body from above, giving him back 50% health and full mana. He then comes back to life, knocking up and dealing 200 physical damage while applying a 2-second stun to all nearby enemies. It's clear to see that Greystone can be played as a fighter or as a tank, and depending on what your team needs or your playstyle, your build may vary, but I feel like this build offers the best of both worlds. You do some damage, so you definitely feel like you have an impact on the game, but you also have a lot of armor, health and support items like Satori Cloak to assist your real damage dealers in eliminating the enemy team. My deck looks like this. I have my Centurion as the prime card for that health bonus, a health potion and a healer token. The healer token will help give me some sustain in lane in case I end up laning against a ranger hero. Having the passive health regen is quite useful. My first equipment card is my Guardian's Ward with 2 minor strikes and a lesser health, followed up by my late game Guardian's Ward with a lesser health and major strike. If you only happen to have 1 Guardian's Ward, you can replace the early Guardian's Ward with a Brawler's Ward. Throw 3 minor strikes into this. I throw in a Rust Breaker next with 2 minor strikes and a strike. We don't really need to add any penetration cards because we have Satori Cloak and the bulk of the damage should come from our carry. We move on to our tanky items with our tempered plate with 3 greater guards, our early game tempered plate with a minor guard and 2 lesser healths, followed up by our early game tuned barrier with a minor barrier and 2 lesser healths. Our late game tuned barrier has 3 greater healths as our energy armor will go into our Satori Cloak. I then have my Windcarver blade with a minor strike and 2 minor kinetics. This will help you push and farm your lane in the early game. Radiant Mantle is a situational card, but it is very useful if you find yourself up against an Iggy and Scorch. Radiant Mantle will tick down his turrets instantly and he has no choice but to just use his basic attacks on you. Our final card is Satori Cloak. I throw 3 greater barriers into this card. Satori Cloak has a unique passive that says on hit with basic attack, shred enemy physical armor and or energy armor equal to 50% of your current physical and or energy armor. So if you have 200 physical armor, you're going to shred 100 physical armor from the enemy for 4 seconds on hit with the basic attack. The same goes for energy. The build order is fairly straightforward. We start with our health potion and a healer token. When you reach 6 card points, you want to pick up your cheaper Guardian's Ward and max it out. If you're against Iggy in lane, you can take your Radiant Mantle here instead. Your next 6 card points are for your Windcarver blade, but if you are struggling in the solo lane, you can pick up your cheaper armor item. Remember, every game is different, so adapt the build order accordingly. Next, I take my Rust Breaker to hit through their basic armor, maxing that out completely. I'll now move on to my tanky items, taking the armor item I need the most. Either your cheap Tempered or Tuned Barrier will do, and then completing that you can work on the next one. I sell my health potion here because I know my next back I'll be removing it anyway. Now you have both cheap armor items, you can sell your healer token for Satori or just get more armor if you don't need Satori just yet. I sell my cheap Tempered plate and max out my more expensive one. I then sell my cheap Tune Barrier, replacing that with Satori and maxing that out. The healer token is then replaced with my 12 cost Tune Barrier with 3 greater health. And finally, I replace my cheap Guardian's Ward with my more expensive version. The 60 card point build looks something like this. We have our Tune Barrier with greater health, a Windcarver blade for some attack speed and damage, a Rust Breaker again for damage, Satori Cloak to help penetrate the armor for our allies and provide us with energy armor, Guardian's Ward because Ward save lives, and a Tempered plate with 3 greater guards. Now we've had a look at the build, let's take a look at the guide. Greystone really struggles as a jungler in my opinion. Sure, he can clear it quite quickly, but his kit doesn't offer him anything for ganking that other heroes like Rampage, Grux and Chimera have. That form of engagement is vital for securing kills and Greystone lacks this. This is the reason why Greystone is so often dedicated to the blue lane, but this actually suits him. You want to focus getting last hits as this is your #1 priority. If you can get a 1 or 2 card level advantage over your opponent during this laning phase, he is going to struggle to keep up. You have the ability to play really aggressive because you have a second life. This can lead to situations where you starve the enemy for CP, forcing them under their tower and increasing your lead. This is the exact situation I put myself in against Grux. Notice how I have full control over the lane. I can do pretty much whatever I want while Grux has to sit under his tower, and this is because of a few things. Firstly, I have Sustain. The health regen is keeping me at full health while Grux is relying on his health potion. Once I poke him enough, he is forced to play safe or return to base, both of which put him behind farm. Secondly, I've managed to get more last hits than him, so I have more card points, and thanks to the early game damage in our build, we can definitely kill him. Now when the lane is pushed up to their tower, you can invade the jungle if it is safe to do so. Pushing the wave under his tower reduces the chances of him getting last hits because a lot of players struggle with the tower damage hitting minions as well. You can see that I pushed the wave into his tower, dewarded and grab a tier 2 camp. This takes away farm from their jungler and increases my lead. In my other videos I talked about only last hitting and not pushing the wave, but on Greystone in the blue lane you can definitely apply pressure because you have that second life, and notice how I'm only ever pushing or invading their jungle when I have vision of the enemy team and especially their jungler. Also, something I forgot to do but I try to keep reminding myself is when you do invade, throw a ward into their jungle. The vision definitely helps. Sometimes you'll catch enemies doing buffs when they're really low and you could pick up an easy kill. With that second life, you definitely want to use it to soak up as much damage as possible for your team, and if you can get the enemies or the tower to focus you, that's giving your allies extra time to deal damage and stay alive. When possible, you do want to wait for your minions, but I dive straight in, heading right for the tower. This is your priority. Kill the tower first and then the enemy heroes. The enemy Fae uses her ultimate on me. I'm soaking up the tower damage and hero damage for my team. My ultimate goes off and we secure the tower. Getting that tier 2 tower meant my team could push and take an inhibitor. We burnt a lot of enemies' ultimates in them just trying to defend their tier 2, and they wasted a Fae ultimate on me as well as a lot of mana. Soaking up most of the damage also means my team have a lot of life while the enemy team are almost all below half health. The enemy team are too low to defend their inhibitor, we secure it and go on to win the game. I want to talk about rotations and positioning more than anything. These two things can win or lose you the game. Making rotations is key, but the most difficult part is when and how, and this is what separates the good players from the great players. I spot the enemy team grouping up in mid lane, and this is the time I have to head over to help my allies. Yes, the tower is probably gone, but if we can punish them, then maybe we can secure a couple objectives of our own. Had I not rotated, my team would be forced to retreat under their inhibitor, and we most likely wouldn't have been able to counter their push. Sometimes you'll be caught in two binds, and this is what happens here, but as long as you make the right call, eventually you should be fine. Making the right call correctly and quickly comes with time and experience. I want to head over to the right lane to defend the tier 2, but picking up a couple of kills in mid could be an inhibitor for us. I make the call as soon as I see Mr. Wacko drop into our jungle. At this point, two things can happen. 1. His team come to help him, or 2. They leave him to die. Most teams at Plat and Diamond Elo are going to rotate to help him, while I find at lower Elos they usually just let him die. We engage the fight and it's a pretty long and drawn out one, but we emerge victorious with 5 kills. This opens up several opportunities for us. We can push a lane, take some towers, or if all prime is up, we can take that pretty much uncontested. The key thing here is that had I rotated to the right lane, Grux eventually came mid, my team would be fighting 4v5 and we would have 100% lost that fight. Making the right call and rotation is vital, especially on a frontline hero like Greystone. We covered quite a bit and there is still a lot to say on rotations, but I'll leave you with some general points to get you started. If you see an ally in your jungle fighting an enemy, rotate. If you see an ally fighting in the enemy jungle, rotate, but make sure that you're not going to get collapsed on. If you see the enemy grouping up to take your tower or your allies are grouping up to do the same, rotate. Remember that if you are rotating, you need to set up slow pushes in your lanes to prevent them from killing your tower and applying pressure to theirs. To set up a slow push, you kill the ranged minions and let your minions do the rest. I hope you guys enjoyed this guide. If you did, smash that thumbs up button. Let me know what hero you want me to cover next, and until next time guys, peace.